I often don't talk about my day job, but I wanted to briefly talk about kind of what I do at OTC. It's essentially I am leading a group project. I don't know how you feel about group projects. When I was growing up, I never really enjoyed them because it seemed like I did a lot of the work and my group members did not do very much work. But I'm privileged to work alongside a number of people that are working on this group project because, quite frankly, one person cannot do what our big project is. And there are times when group projects are not so great, but there are also some times that it's kind of fun to be part of a group that's working together with one heart and one mind to accomplish something. So I thought we would start with that. If you have anything to share about some of the better group projects that you have been a part of. I appreciated the focus, Michelle, on heaven being something to look forward to, and Laura broadening that conversation to be something that we look forward to right now, that we get to be a part of a group, kind of a group project, walking each other home. One of my favorite proverbs is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so for whatever reason, as I was writing this talk this week, a bunch of song lyrics were popping into my head. And the one that Michelle, your focus made me think of is, ooh, heaven is a place on earth. They say in heaven, love comes first, but you make heaven a place on earth. And so I wanted to talk about how this idea of being in community together, to practice communion, or communing is what I call it today, as one of the ways that we extend love to each other, but also one of the ways that really makes life worth living. To continue in this series of how we live out love every day, I think communing is one of the ways that we can love whoever's in front of us, regardless of who they are. The first idea I wanted to talk about was doing life together. I Google, sometimes I just Google some phrases to find a picture of an idea that I want to share. And I wanted to share the idea of eating alone. And so I Googled eating alone and clicked on the images button. And I found this picture, and it was an article about how if you want to control your calories, eat alone, because when you're alone, you tend to eat less. And that's a great way to reduce your caloric intake. And I thought, how sad is that, that we are using loneliness and isolation and just the lack of fun around food when other people aren't around as a way to lose weight or whatever, reach our lifestyle goals. Because it is true, when we are together, we are happier, and when we're happier, we tend to eat a little bit more together. And I think food is probably the one area for me where it's always better when there are people around. But you might think of some other things that you do in your life that it's just better when we're together rather than when we're alone. In Acts chapter 2, it describes the early church. It's one of my favorite pictures of what it means to be the church. And just for brevity, cutting some bits out to highlight the things they did together. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, the breaking of bread, which is often a phrase that kind of means the practice of communion, prayers. They were together and had all things in common. They sold their possessions. They distributed the proceeds to all. They attended the temple together. They broke bread in their homes with glad and generous hearts. They were praising God and having favor with all the people. That kind of sounds a little bit like heaven. And I don't mean to paint a rosy picture of the early church or even the life that we have together, because there are other chapters in Acts and they're not quite so rosy. And we know that in life together, as Rima was saying, sometimes it's just absolutely delightful, and other times it's a little bit more like hard work. And yet, these are the things that we are privileged to do together, to do life together. And so I guess it's my encouragement to us, coming out of perhaps the most isolating season that many of us have lived through, is to be about the business of creating community and inviting other people in. It can be something as heartwarming and intimate as sharing a meal at your house with other people. It can be something much more simple, like going grocery shopping together or reading a book together from a distance. Anything that you choose to do, you can probably find a way to include or invite other people to do it with you. It's such a simple thing to think of inviting someone just to do a regular everyday task with you. And yet these are the things that make a difference in our lives, that make life better, that create the community that we all long for, to create community and invite people in. We can do life together and make life worth remembering. I'm struck by the times that just the mundane things that we do, if we do them together, those are the things that last. The things I do by myself, I'm probably not going to remember even in a week, but when I do something with someone else, intentionally or accidentally, those are the things that always come to mind about how good my life has been. Next, I wanted to talk about the idea of being united with no exceptions. I thought it was funny that we talked about Sarah and Richard dog sitting a Baptist dog, because when I was growing up, we would talk about beating the Baptists out to Golden Corral. We wanted to get done before they did so we could get to seats at the restaurants and whatnot. That's kind of a lighthearted way that we kind of compare and divide ourselves to the Baptists or the whoever. But there's often a less heartwarming way that we kind of divide ourselves unnecessarily from people that are a lot like us. We tend to focus on where we're different rather than where we're similar. We do this in religious settings and in non-religious settings, at work, at home, at school. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10, Paul says, "I appeal to you, sisters and brothers, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ." I want to highlight that. We tend to skip over it, but Paul is saying, "I am begging you, sisters and brothers, in the name of our mutual Savior." He's not taking this lightly. "That all of you agree, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be united in the same mind and the same judgment." There's a word that is used for this kind of division, demonization, where we make the other person like a demon, like they're bad and evil. It's us versus them. In my life, looking out at our culture, it is the thing that we do very, very well. We demonize other people. And as you probably are aware, that leads to a lot of division, a lot of heartache, and not a lot of progress. It's painful to watch, and it's painful to be a part of. I often talk about things that are aspirational, but one of the things that's most aspirational for me right now is to, rather than demonizing another person, to find the places where we differ and disagree and where they're obviously morally inferior to me and they should change their life, to find instead and highlight the common ground that we have, the things on which we agree, the intentions that we both have, whether that be to follow God, to walk in the way of Jesus, to be a part and a citizen of the country that we love, to do a job that helps people, whatever it is. We often have much more in common than we have that should separate us. And so one of the most practical ways we can do this is to, in our approach to people, just find and highlight the common ground first, rather than looking for the ways we disagree first. In our words, in our attitude, and publicly and intentionally with the other person, find and highlight how we're the same or what unifies us. And then we can move on to how we differ and disagree and all that stuff. But it's important that we find and highlight all that we have in common, because it's much greater than what separates us. We can be united with no exception as our default approach to people. it takes a change. It's difficult to do because, as I mentioned before, we're really good at talking about and identifying how we're different. But our standard approach can be how we are united and what we have in common. Thirdly, I wanted to talk about this idea of refusing divisions. I got to go to a conference this week, which are often a lot of fun. This one happened to include a lot more work than I was expecting, but one of the things that happened was one of my colleagues approached me very passionately about something that they wanted to be sure that we made happen together. And I could see in their eyes that they were, you could call it upset or angry. They felt like they didn't have a lot of power in the situation, and they wanted to make sure that we were making good decisions for students. And it's quite easy, at least for me, to approach the person in front of me with the same energy, the same emotions that they're bringing to the table. And so I could feel it behind my eyes, like I almost got angry. And maybe for the first time in my life, I decided, you know what, this is not, I care about this person. I don't want to approach this person with anger. I trust their good intentions. And so I decided in that moment when they were in my face, I'm not going to be angry. We're going to find common ground. I want to let them know that they have an ally in me. I won't tell you the resolution of the story, but what's important is that we can, if we do it intentionally, we can refuse to divide, to see the other person as the enemy. It's maybe the most spiritual thing I've done in a long time, to refuse this potential division that did not need to exist. In Romans chapter 12, don't pay any attention to Willie Nelson there. In Romans chapter 12, verses 20 and 21, it says, this is Paul again, and he's talking about being angry and seeking vengeance against people that are your enemy. He says, to the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on their head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And for many, many years, I've not liked this. I like the intention of loving your enemy. I mean, Jesus says that's the approach we should do. But I don't like the idea of being kind to someone to heap burning coals on their head. That doesn't seem very Jesus-y. And I kind of approached that differently this week. I don't know if you've ever had a live coal on your head, but I haven't, and you probably haven't either, but I would imagine it's something that stays on your mind. It's always on your mind, no matter what else is going on. And then I was like, hey, Willie Nelson sang a song about this. You're always on my mind. I think that when we approach someone who is angry or who considers themselves our enemy, whatever, and we refuse to divide, when we show them love, when we care about them as a person, when we trust their good intentions, even if they still leave as our enemy, I think that's always going to be on their mind. And I think that's what Paul is trying to get at here. Paul and Willie make a good team, I think, to not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. To take the actions that, just like Jesus changed the world through relatively small, loving acts, we can do the same thing and keep that loving kindness always on the other person's mind. And a jingle popped into my head. I'm not an insurance person. I don't have any particular love for Nationwide. Nationwide is not sponsoring this message in any way. But we can take an intention to change and set the emotional tone of any interaction we're in. It's challenging to do. It's challenging. But like Nationwide, we can come to the table with the intention to be on the other person's side. I think that's maybe why everyone loved Jesus so much, is because they could see in his eyes, they could hear it in his voice that he loved them. And we can do that too. We can approach every interaction with the intention that I'm on this person's side. We are not enemies. We're a team walking each other home. We can refuse divisions and set an emotional tone of kindness and collaboration in every situation. So these are 3 ways that I think we can intentionally live out this idea of communing with the person in front of us. We can create community and invite people in. We can find and highlight common ground, and we can change and set the emotional tone, regardless of who's in front of us, regardless of the discussion. I've been trying to highlight what I think is a good tone for our community as we approach God. I think just one way we can live out love is the idea of thanking, or of approaching with gratitude our relationship with God. That if we approach God with gratitude or with thankfulness, that's enough. In approaching ourselves, we can allow ourselves room to change and grow. I know stability is safe, and security is something that we all desire. And at the same time, as we follow God, God's going to lead us to places that cause us to change and grow, and we can welcome that as our approach to ourselves. But in living out love with the people around us, the crossbar of the cross, I think one of the primary ways we can live out love every day is through communing. In talking with Rima, she describes it as community life, the intention of doing life together in big ways and small ways, in living out community, not choosing to go it alone, but choosing to go far together. I think overall this creates an easy to remember picture of how we can approach God, how we can approach ourselves, and how we can approach those around us. I hope you find it helpful. But all of this is just another image of living out love, and maybe living out love as a community. So may you live a happy, memorable life in community. May you see people as your fellow humans rather as enemies. May your intentional kindness make a lasting impression. And may you help create the world where no one walks alone.